because within context, what you're saying, actually, there's a lot of things that make sense there. Like for the investigative agency, sometimes people wonder why do they let a relationship with the staff member and an inmate go on so long before they finally do something. It's because the unethical behavior may not be criminal, and the investigative division has to wait for something criminal, probably for it to be acted on, where the facility itself wants the preventive measure. I don't want to wait for something to be criminal. So
exactly.
so usually the balance is going to be some security measured, not so overt, but enough to kind of monitor the behavior so it doesn't get to that point. But you're still able to see the potential for the criminal act to occur, like maybe an exchange or something that shouldn't happen. So it's the investigative division is chasing for the criminal action we want to prevent. We don't want to get to that point, but in order to solidify this, you got to have something that starts to lean towards that criminal action.
And that's the problem with the hammer and nail analogy, though, is if you think that every real problem can only look like a nail, then the only solution that you're ever going to come up with is a hammer. And so that's why I would caution, the guys in your investigative units and stuff. You know what? I would rather get to something too early and have to produce some really good paperwork and work to get someone fired than I would to have them, accidentally the first time they bring something in, it be not some, dope or a cell phone, but it be, a gun or something where an escape attempt happened or somebody got hurt or killed. I think that we need to be, more on the preemptive and preventative side rather than thinking, well, I got to find a way to make this stick in case it goes to court.
Well, right. So I think so. I also think there's a preventive measure in that too. But I get what you're saying, Russ. Like I think that there is, when it comes to undue familiarity, at least that's the scope of the dialogue today, is that it's gonna if it leads towards something criminal, the investigative division needs that for the accountability side. We want the preventive measure. So we don't want it to get to that point. So having said that, a good working relationship between, let's say, the administrative team and the investigative division can allow for that balance where we have preventive measures in place so we don't allow for something to get too far, but we also get to the point where the person can't deny the motive. I think that's the concern too with undue familiarity. Like you want to go after someone, let's say, because they're showing favoritism to an inmate. Well, the investigative division is going to want to kind of say, well, where's the criminal in that? Where we know, well, wait a second, guys, that's where manipulation starts. Undue familiarity could be the heart of vulnerability and making people more susceptible to manipulation. So the end result is I don't want it to get there. So having said that, can we do something now? And the investigative division is like, yeah, but I can't just go on what you think is a motive. I need to put something in place where the motive of that individual can't be denied. So we need to get to a point where there's evidence, where there's something that I can showcase that the person can't deny their intent or their motive. And I think that's why, guys, if you have a undue relationship going on in the facility, that's why before anybody acts on making an effort to separate, so many parties are going to be involved in that decision, including the investigative division being number one, because the last thing you want to do is separate and violate a due process of an investigation in which they're close to connecting what they need to hold that person accountable. So, Russ, there is a balance here, Russ. I mean, you got to balance the overall. I
think there is, but I've just seen a lot of people let their egos override what's best.
But I don't want to. Right. So I don't want to go on that extreme. What if? I don't want to stereotype, because that's no different than saying we're going to stereotype everybody towards the worst. I want to just mention that there is that level of accountability that allows for it to be preventive, because at the end of the day, it does showcase that, hey, we don't tolerate this, and hopefully other people start to step up and realize, like, yo, we're on point. But sometimes the conflict here is basically we want that preventive measure. They want that that criminal charge. Either way, I don't think we're that far in what we ultimately want for the facility. We want a safer facility. So having said that, there's usually that balance of, well, how do we meet both? How do we make sure that now that we know that there's a concern or there's something starting to happen between, let's say, Russ and this inmate, how do I balance or create some level of safety while we allow this relationship to pursue to that criminal act? Right? Would you agree?
Yes.
You know,
I just want people to be, huh?
No, go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I was gonna say, I just want people to be aware that the last thing that we want to do is put people in jeopardy, because I've seen that happen firsthand in an incident that we were involved in that involved an armed correctional officer whose house was served a warrant while he was up in the tower. And the people that served that warrant was the local county, and they didn't bother to tell us. And they knew that he was assigned to that tower, and they knew that he had a gun. And we were just very lucky that it all worked out the right way.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that could be just a failure to communicate. I actually, in my report writing book, I actually have something similar to this. Actually, I'm thinking about it. I actually discussed something where when you guys, a little sidebar here, when an incident report usually has what they call follow-ups. An investigative report has what they call recommendations. Follow-ups are usually immediate, maybe done by a supervisor, just to, if you have a riot in yard, let me follow up to make sure tensions, whatever, something immediate. Recommendations are more long-term, which could also include punitive action. And sometimes what happens is, if, let's say, the supervisor needs to do an immediate follow-up, but that immediate follow-up could jeopardize maybe an investigative concern that they're trying to address. Well, now we have to figure out and work together. What can we do that balances things out? How do I maintain safety without violating the due process of an investigation? And guys, these are decisions that a decision like this is really made almost every day at the facility. If there's an investigation that can lead to a criminal matter, but we have an effort to want to keep a safe facility, we have to ask ourselves, okay, so how far do we want this to go? And how do we mitigate it in the meantime to make sure that this is carefully monitored? Because there's even a risk from the investigative division, Russ, too. And I want to mention that, because if I'm the investigative division, and again, going back to the undue familiarity or the developed relationship between, let's say, staff, an unprofessional relationship between staff and inmate, the investigative division takes a huge risk in trying to chase after that criminal element, because they know that there's a chance that during this process, they could lose sight of what that corrupted act could be. So let's say, like you said, Russ, it could be bringing, let's say, something into the facility. So if I'm the investigative division and I decide, hey, listen, Russ, here's what I want to do. And let's say you're admin. I know I can get this guy. I know this person's bringing something in. So it's getting to that point where it's crossing into corruption. If I can make sure that, when he's getting ready to bring it in, let's say we're all within the lobby. So the moment he gets through the metal detector, because that's the intent. You got to get that person through the metal detector, because that's when they cross the line into the controlled compound. Then we're there immediately to make the rest, right or wrong. Right or wrong. If we go there and he doesn't have anything, holy shit, we messed up, but at least we're not allowing them into the facility. So it's a huge risk when that decision is made to balance safety and security with that need to catch that criminal act for accountability. And when administration finally agrees on, okay, we're going to let this relationship play out, but you better make sure, because this is for the safety of staff, because I do want this guy out or this woman out, and I want to make sure that they can never get their job again. Because that's another thing. I need evidence to get that. So I get why we want to do it, because I want to make sure that this person can never find a job in law enforcement again, and maybe, get arrested for what they're doing. But you got to make sure that you make a promise here that we don't jeopardize any safety and security in the effort to get this person to follow through with whatever this exchange is, or the potential. And again, guys, it's extremely tough, because even when it comes to undue relationships, you need something to validate the motive or the intent. So you could see things all day, but if there's no evidence, that person could change their story. Like, if someone goes to bring in drugs into the facility, how do you prove that those drugs are for the inmate population? Regardless, they're wrong anyway, but I want to get that distribution charge. I want to get a couple of things in there. But right now I got a guy that comes in with marijuana that says, oh shit, I didn't mean to bring that in. I meant to give that to my father. I must have left it in my jacket last night. So you got to prove that you can debunk whatever excuse that they're going to have. Now, and that's not easy. So guys, again, let's go back to the undue. That was a good little sidebar. We could do a whole dialogue on that.